Welcome back to the Media Marketing Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about podcasting your brand. So what is a podcast? Well, you're listening to this one, so you probably know what it is. But essentially, a podcast is a modern blog. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, people were writing blog posts to establish their thought leadership, to create a community, to share ideas and knowledge with other people within that community. So now you can do it through the audio form, which for someone who has a little bit more personality, who has comfortability speaking, who has good charisma, that's where a podcast really helps them thrive. It's more intimate than reading because the audio is going right into someone's ear, whereas reading has a little bit more work. You have to be focused, and you can't be reading while you're driving in the car. You can't be reading while you're sitting at your desk. But you can potentially. I've done this. You can read and walk, and you can read while exercising. But only certain exercises, whereas a podcast you can listen to pretty much anything, and they do have underwater headphones to be able to listen while you're swimming if you'd like. And they're becoming a lot more popular today, easy to access, and to be an early adopter now, I don't know if you're too much of an early adopter, there's so many, but to do it now rather than wait 5 years, 3 years, things are moving quickly, so now's the time. So we're going to be breaking down in this episode who should make a podcast and who's your audience, what is a podcast and what to talk about, when, so that's frequency, where, the different platforms, why you should do it, so that's your who, what, when, where, why, and then talking about equipment briefly. I don't like to get too hung up on equipment because at the end of the day, I think production is more important than having the latest gadgets, especially in the early stages where you're just trying to learn those systems and processes. And then tips, things I've learned along the way, some common pitfalls that I would like to help you not go through on your journey as you're doing all this. So anyway, let's cue the intro.
Thank you for checking out the Media Marketing Podcast, a place where you can learn all things media and marketing related. Don't miss a beat in boosting your business and your brand. In each episode, you'll gain valuable insights, tools, and strategies to apply to your marketing efforts. And now your host, Brian Cargill.
All right, so starting off with who should make a podcast? I think anyone who has a little bit of expertise in something should definitely have a podcast, whether you're 5 years into your career, 10 years, you have knowledge in things that you had to overcome, and making that journey a little bit easier for the people coming up behind you is huge, or just sharing knowledge or sharing things that are up to date with the industry, being a resource of latest news and happenings, or just best practices that you've learned can help the community, can help the world. So who is your audience? I think it's not as important to get caught up in defining your audience specifically in the beginning, mainly as someone starting out, just because a lot of people think, everyone is my audience right off the bat, and I think you'll find that that's not the case as you keep diving deeper into certain subjects. For example, this podcast, my audience isn't everybody. It is people that are in the marketing field who are looking to continue to build tools and have the resources to implement some strategies into their own marketing plans, as well as small business owners, people trying to do it on their own, trying to learn those skills, individuals that are trying to develop their personal and professional brand. That's where this podcast comes in hand. Trying to define and be really segmented, it can go a long way in the early stages if you hone in on what you want to do, but I don't think it's as necessary to completely dive into it, because I think that can be a hindrance to a lot of people. They might be afraid to start because they said, I don't want to talk about this because my audience might not like it. I would say start producing content first and then start to refine things later on. Next is what? So what are the topics of interest? What are the things that you want to talk about? Then this is the time where it's okay to start dreaming big about what are the different things that you'd like to cover, and what are things that are happening within your industry. What are the tips and tools that you can provide to people that it will give them advice, that will give them, success in what they're trying to do. From my experience, it's important to kind of segment what it is that you want to talk about. I think some people have a lot of things that they want to say that fall into different categories, such as, maybe you have advice that you want to dispense about your industry, but then you want to talk about something personal or your other side interests. And what happens here is you start to confuse your listeners, the people that signed up, because you want to make things as easy as possible and as direct. So if you start going over different interests that are outside of what your audience wants to listen to, you'll have some people that might stick around, but the success rate drops quite a bit when you start going into these different avenues that just aren't of interest to that person. So to find someone that actually fully aligns with all the things that specifically that you like is hard to do. So sticking to one train of thought, sticking within one advice column, or if it's just personal, sticking just to that, or if you have a specific interest, whether that's, basketball, or a specific video game, or if you're talking about a service or a professional value add that you have for your clients, that's where just stay into one thing. And then if you do want to talk about other things, build out other channels, so that way you have that flexibility, especially someone like myself who has the creative mind, or just like different things that I'm interested that I'd like to talk about. Segmenting those is huge for your audience and getting people just to know what they're signing up for. And then on that same vein, don't do a personal channel unless it's purely for fun, and mainly that's because a personal channel, being someone that's in the spotlight, that's gonna kind of be a flash in the pan. You can only, if you do have success, you think about all the personalities that we've seen that someone has risen to fame and then you don't hear about them anymore. Things that come to mind is like Logan Paul, or even some of these other personalities like Casey Neistat. The only way you can stay relevant is if you continually produce content. And those are both YouTubers. There's a handful of others, TV celebrities, musicians, comedians. All these guys, they kind of come and go because it's hard to stay fresh all the time. People always want something new. But if you build out a professional podcast where you talk about your thought leadership, that has a little bit more longevity, and you're providing value rather than entertainment, where entertainment has its time and place, but people want new entertainment all the time. Whereas it comes to knowledge, people reflect back on old knowledge. Think about all these books that have stood the test of time, that people continually go back to get ideas, to learn, and just kind of process those things. All right, so when should you post? I would say this is another thing that people get really hung up on, because your production schedule is, one, going to change with your own set of circumstances, and then two, you're still figuring things out. There's a learning curve to all the different aspects of creating a podcast, from planning to production to posting, and on all the follow-up promotional stuff around it. So you're going to find there's certain things that you're better at, some things that you're not quite as good at, and adjusting time for all of those different variables, giving yourself a buffer of a database of pre-recorded podcasts for your scheduling. But just having a handful of episodes at the beginning is essential. And then from there, once you kind of have a good 5 to 10, 15 episodes, figuring out some kind of cadence is going to give your audience something that they can look forward to with each episode. So if you post on a Wednesday or a Friday or a Saturday, just keeping that consistent, and you can always move it down the road. So if Wednesdays just don't work after your trial and error, maybe Thursdays work better, or Monday, because then you have all weekend to edit. But just taking those different considerations into account when you're creating. So that's when, and then where are you going to post a podcast? You can post on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. I've even seen people take their podcast and they put the full length on YouTube. It's getting really popular to create segments about something. Maybe you do a hot take on something within your podcast, and just having the 5-10 minutes live there, and getting people excited, and then they become a follower once they find that one little nugget. They want to listen to what else you have to say. I like to use Anchor.fm to share. That third party, they will put your podcast on all these other channels for you, which is really nice. Next with the podcast, why? Well, it helps build your personal brand. And then, think for yourself, well, what is your mission? What do you want to try to do with your podcast? Are you trying to help people? Are you trying to prove a point? Are you trying to convince some people of something? Why is it that you want to do it? And that's going to help you get through all the different hard times of building a podcast. And another why intrinsically will be that it helps you build your professional brand and your credibility. And then also thinking within the why realm is, why should your audience listen? What are they going to be getting from it that they can't get anywhere else? And what makes you unique? I'm not saying that in a negative way, why should you? But just thinking, putting yourself in their shoes, what are they going to be taking away? What will they be able to do to implement the strategies and the ideas that you've given them into their own day-to-day lives or their careers? All right, so that's all our W's. And then for equipment, I think a lot of people, I mentioned this earlier, get very hung up on having the latest equipment or having the right things. And in your early stages of anything, people are very forgiving. They understand that, okay, you might not have access to the best resources. So doing what you can with what you have is something you got to do at the grassroots level when you're bootstrapping it. For me, in my early stages of doing podcasting, I like to use a field recorder. The benefits of a field recorder is that it's portable. It's on the go. So if you want to do an interview, you don't have to always have someone come to your office or come to your location. You can meet them there. You can go out and to a coffee shop. It gives you that flexibility. I use the Zoom H4n. Now they have a 6, and there's rumors of a 7 coming out. But the Zoom series is nice. But honestly, if you go online, and any device that is designed specifically for audio is going to work. Trying to use your phone or trying to use a video camera, they will work, but having something that is actually built with the audio in mind is going to just produce so much better quality overall. You can get these adapters for your phone, and if you are on a low budget, getting a little microphone adapter for, I think they see it. I've seen them as low as $5.99, $10, but it's worth it to pay $50, $100 because you're gonna have it for a long time, and just making that initial investment, you're not gonna feel bad about spending too much because you're gonna use it. And maybe the more that you spend, the more likely you are to stick with it. I'd recommend getting a device that has an SD card slot. So some of these are field recorders. All the memory they have is just within that device. I would get one that has an SD card slot, because then you can always upgrade the amount of memory it'll hold. You can, instead of 2 gigabytes, you can bump that up to 8 or 16, 32. And then if you ever wanted to, you can swap out memory cards, or you can hand it off to someone that wants to edit. That just gives you a lot more flexibility rather than the whole device itself, which can max out, or you have to refresh it every time. Those SD cards are really good to have on hand. So that's a recording device. Microphone, I like to use a lav mic when I'm out in the field. A lav mic is just those little tiny ones that clip onto your shirt, have a wire that attach into the device. Those are great for blocking out the sound in a noisy room. It's going to be right close to your mouth, so you're going to get good quality. The only downside is they are a smaller microphone, so they're not going to pick up as much bass or have as much of a fullness in their sound, even though lav mics are getting pretty good. But until they're absolutely perfect, there's nothing that really beats your traditional podcast mic. So yeah, I think that's what also makes podcasting pretty exciting, is that the equipment is pretty simple. You have your recording device, and then you have a computer edit it. So really any computer works well. I think people within the Mac world, you can use GarageBand to edit. Audacity is a free program that you can download online. And I'm going to add a list, I'm going to put a link in the description with like a list for beginners, different equipment that you can use. So those are the 3 things. And then the software is, or not the software, but for sharing it out, I like using Anchor. So that's a good one that gets it everywhere. And so the equipment is one side of it, but another big aspect of a podcast is you want to make sure you have an outline. You have some content planning, because you don't want to just come up to a podcast and start talking unless it's a subject that you know absolutely like the back of your hand. Having a set of bullet points that you're going to go through, that you're going to talk about, is going to allow your audience to get the most value out of what it is that you're talking about. So in the early stages, thinking about just content, you can Dreamstorm. You can just start thinking about what is it that, get all of your thoughts out there. What are all the most key fundamental things that your audience needs to be able to be successful in whatever it is that you're talking about. And then trying to think of a map of, okay, how should I lay out this information in a way that makes the most sense to my audience, that's going to be easy for them to follow, for them to get some good value, for them to be able to stay along with you on the ride as you keep developing and building upon your curriculum, I guess, for a better term, as you're teaching people what it is that you want to help them learn and get better at. And then also starting to think about guests. Having a guest on a podcast can help you not have to come up with all the answers, allows you to have a little bit of banter, some personality, bounce ideas off of someone else, and you can kind of catch each other while you're speaking. So if someone kind of runs out of their train of thought, the next person can interject and help carry the conversation. So as you're building your podcast, just start asking people, start having those conversations saying, oh, I have a podcast. Would you be interested in talking about whatever it is, X, Y, and Z that you talked about in the conversation that you had with them? I've found that goes a long way. And people are generally pretty excited to be on a podcast because, one, you're putting all the focus on them, so they get to talk about themselves. You get to ask all the questions. 2, it helps continue to establish their thought leadership in the industry. And 3, it's just like concise messaging. They're helping the community, helping your community as well as building their own. The next one is, what have I learned along the way that I can share with you to help you not go through the same challenges that I went through? Is do the best with what you can. Do what you can with what you have. If you only just have an iPhone, I know I mentioned that it's not specifically designed for audio, but just starting to build things out with an iPhone or with the microphone that's built into your computer, it's not going to be the best, but you're going to learn right away if this is going to be something you want to do for the long run. So it'll help you decide if you do want to make the investment into the higher quality equipment. And you should see right away, once you do make that investment, man, that was totally worth it. But yeah, that's what life's about, is like, you got your own set of circumstances, your own set of tools at your disposal, and what can you do today that will help you tomorrow. I think another good tip is being easy on yourself, especially in the beginning, because there's so much of a learning curve. Usually we build up in our minds that things are going to be a lot harder than they actually are, and so we procrastinate and put it off. But that's not always the worst thing. Sometimes it's necessary to wait and let things mull over and think about things in your mind before going live, because that mulling over process allows you to produce just a better quality product, better content at the end of the day.